Trump derangement syndrome. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No. Have you apologized to President Trump?
I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
On the afternoon of November 13th, 2024, not even 2 weeks after his stunning upset victory that allowed him to reclaim the White House, President-elect Donald Trump was flying aboard his own Trump Force One on a trip back from Washington. He had just spent 2 hours meeting with then-President Joe Biden, who assured a peaceful transfer of power would commence as planned on January 20th, wasting the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever, in my opinion. Thus, Trump was faced with the task of filling out his cabinet. He had been announcing picks all week through emails sent out to the media by his transition team, though it was on this flight that a critical 2-hour conversation was being held. Who would become the next U.S. Attorney General? Discussing the matter with some of his top officials, which included the likes of Elon Musk, Susie Wiles, and his top legal advisor Boris Epstein, a decision was finally made. By the time the plane touched down in West Palm Beach, the news was already out, delivered not by his transition team, but by the president-elect himself on Truth Social. It was announced that Trump's first pick for the nation's top law enforcement official would be none other than Matt Gaetz, a Florida congressman and an unshakable defender of the MAGA movement. Oh yeah, and also an alleged sexual predator. Predictably, the pick sent shockwaves throughout the press. Gaetz had not only made a name for himself as one of Trump's most colorful and controversial advocates, he had also made headlines after the Justice Department, the one he would be theoretically leading, had investigated him for child sex trafficking that ended without charges in 2023. But Gaetz was also subject to a bipartisan House Ethics Committee investigation that later found substantial evidence that he had had sex with a 17-year-old girl in 2017. As reported by the New York Times, the victim in question was a high school junior in Florida, working at McDonald's and living in and out of a homeless shelter. She had resorted to having sex with powerful men for money so that she may be able to afford braces. This was all gonna be a problem for Gaetz, who, in order to join the new administration, would first need to get confirmed by a simple majority vote in the Senate. Although the Republicans enjoyed a slim majority, the question of whether or not enough members would be willing to set aside their morals to appoint an alleged pedophile as Attorney General was unclear. Senators like Tommy Tuberville and Lindsey Graham may have alluded to votes in the affirmative, but others, like Lisa Murkowski, John Curtis, and Mitch McConnell, had threatened to be spoilers. And when intervention from the president's chief loser failed to yield any results, the writing on the wall became clear. Matt Gaetz was considered too evil for even the most evil administration in modern history. So out stepped a Florida man and in stepped a Florida woman to fill his spot. The reported godmother to Gaetz's Australian Shepherd mix, who sure may not be accused of committing sordid crimes herself, but has certainly done a lot to protect those who have.
Now to the fallout, and it continues over the Justice Department's failure to meet the deadline to release all, that's what the law requires, all of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna and Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, they authored the law, announced late last night that they will bring inherent contempt charges against Attorney General Pam Bondi. In a statement, Khanna called the DOJ's failure to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, quote, an obstruction of justice, unquote.
This video is about Pam Bondi, one of the president's fiercest attack dogs, who made a name for herself by going after leaders who refused to comply with the president's hardline immigration agenda, threatening those who spoke ill of the president and his allies, and most notoriously, doing everything in her power to discredit and humiliate victims of one of the most prolific human traffickers and child sex offenders in American history, amidst claims that this is somehow the most transparent administration administration to ever exist, Pam Bondi's Justice Department has been anything but. Join me as we explore the 14 months Miss Bondi spent atop the most consequential law enforcement body in the nation, how she misused her position and power to protect those who most egregiously violated the law, and how future historians will look back on her reprehensible legacy. It's a legacy of failure, of cover-ups, and blatant disrespect of the victims she once vowed to protect, offering redactions on top of redactions, re-releasing documents that had already been made public, and deflecting from the real concerns people have by screeching about how well the stock market is doing.
The Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now.
Well, guess what? Right after she said that, the Dow fell below 50,000, and now Pam Bondi is out of a job.
Bondi is now the second cabinet official to be fired following Kristi Noem's ouster as DHS secretary last month.
State's top cop was in Ocala today talking to supporters about everything from human trafficking to pill mills.
Yeah, Republican Attorney General Pam Bondi is running to keep her job.
Born on November 17th, 1965, Pamela Jo Bondi was raised in the humid suburbs of Temple Terrace, Florida, alongside her sister Beth and her brother Brad. A close-knit family, all signs point to the Bondi siblings having a pretty standard childhood, one that doesn't exactly warrant a lot of mention outside the fact that their father Joseph served 2 terms as mayor of their town in the 1970s. He had been a college professor at the University of South Florida prior to running for office, with most of her other relatives also pursuing careers in the education field. Pam personally expressed an interest in becoming a pediatrician at first, but she was so horrible at math, that when she entered college, she wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do other than join Tri-Delta. Go Dolphins! Despite getting her bachelor's in criminal justice and aiming for a law degree, Pam Bondi never actually saw herself practicing law, much less becoming a prosecutor. That is until the state attorney, who happened to attend church with the Bondis, convinced her to sign up for a clinic at her law school. In hindsight, I think he and my dad had conspired, she told Elysian magazine shortly after becoming Attorney General of Florida. When you do that, you actually work in a public defender's office or a state attorney's office. I chose the state attorney's office. At the time, I thought, this is the last thing I want to do. And within a month, I was trying cases. I tried 4 jury trials when I was still in law school. Since that time, I never wanted to do anything else. Perhaps it was this opportunity that allowed her to get a sense of what it was like to deal closely with some of society's most vulnerable people, pulling her in a direction of wanting to uplift others. In her own words, I wasn't even sure I wanted to practice until I did that internship. For me, it was all about victims and helping people. And the state attorney's office is where she remained for the next 18 years, working as a prosecutor, telling the magazine that she loved every second of it. Eventually, she says, enough people had begun approaching her about running for attorney general. It was a tough decision since she already had enough cases to handle as it was. Still, she thought she could really revive the broken system she saw in Tallahassee and decided to pull the trigger. I just thought the system needed to be changed, she said. I thought I could make a difference.
This is no place for on-the-job training. I'm Pam Bondi. For 18 years as a prosecutor, I've taken on criminals who scam, terrorize, and kill. Because if you and I don't stand up now, who will?
Pam Bondi, a prosecutor for Attorney General.
Traveling the state for campaign events, Bondi grew even more accustomed to the plight of average Floridians that were struggling, which she says only fueled her desire to help them. I started learning that 7 Floridians were dying a day, every day, from prescription drug overdose, and nothing had been done about it. I thought, wow, I think I can make a difference here. And everywhere I went to speak to groups, whether it was an affluent country club or a county center where women and men of all different ages and demographics were there, I would also address domestic violence, and after every single talk, someone would quietly come up to me and tell me that they were abused and some had been scared to report it. So I thought, wow, maybe I can make a difference here as well. Such an opportunity to make that difference would come when Bondi successfully pulled off a victory and was sworn in as Florida's 37th Attorney General on January 4th, 2011.
She said she received a call from her opponent, conceding minutes before she addressed this crowd.
Dan called. he was very gracious. I believe he's in Miami tonight with his family. We had a great talk. We had a talk about being bipartisan, getting things done in Tallahassee, which is going to be very, very important, and we respect each other, and I think that's very important.
And thus, Attorney General Pam Bondi was off to the races. And much like the early career of Kristi Noem, I shouldn't have to tell you that Pam Bondi spent the next 8 years doing pretty much everything you would expect of a right-wing official. Being the top law enforcement officer in one of the reddest states in the nation, Bondi fearlessly fought the crooked and immoral forces of medical marijuana and marriage equality for gay and lesbian Floridians. Specifically at the beginning of her tenure, fighting hard to maintain Amendment 2, which outlawed gay marriage across the state in 2008. She argued at the time that allowing same-sex marriage would cause serious public harm, and insisted it was her duty to uphold the ban and would do so until the issue reached its finality. Her tune miraculously changed, however, following the devastating Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016, when she magically, overnight, decided that it was actually more advantageous to become an advocate for the LGBTQ community, which led her to be grilled by Anderson Cooper as a hypocrite.
I saw you the other day saying that anyone who attacks the LGBT community, our LGBT community, you said, will be gone after with the full extent of the law.
Exactly right.
I talked to a lot of gay and lesbian people here yesterday who are not fans of yours and who said that they thought you were being a hypocrite. Do you worry about using language accusing gay people of trying to do harm to the people of Florida when doesn't that send a message to some people who might have bad ideas in mind?
Anderson, I don't believe gay people could do harm to the state of Florida.
But you argued that in court.
My lawyer argued a case defending what the Supreme Court allowed the voters to put in our state constitution.
But you were arguing that gay marriage, if there was gay marriage, if there was same-sex marriage, that would do harm to the people of Florida. It's just Florida's assignment.
That it was constitutional to put that in the Constitution.
Are you saying you did not believe it would do harm to Florida?
Of course not. Of course not. Gay people. No, I've never said that. Those words have never come out of my mouth.
But that is specifically what you were arguing in court.
No.
I mean, even here, you could see her honing the combativeness and deflection she'd used to her full advantage a decade later when it was time to defend pedophiles.
The Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
But it wasn't just gay marriage she fought. Bondi also generated headlines at the time for an attempt to end protections for people with pre-existing health conditions when she joined 19 other Republican states to overturn the Affordable Care Act in 2018, a move that was so extreme it even caused Florida's then governor Rick Scott, a biological descendant of Skeletor, I'm pretty sure, to distance himself. A very vocal critic of Obamacare, Scott, who was in the middle of running for U.S. Senate at the time, emphasized the importance of keeping pre-existing provisions as a part of any healthcare reform. The Orlando Sentinel editorial board also reported on a string of Bondi's other legal efforts in this piece, such as her 2015 effort to overturn Obama's Clean Power Plan designed to reduce heat-trapping carbon emissions. Though Florida is among the states most vulnerable to sea level rise and other consequences of climate change, the Sentinel pointed out. This was in addition to another lawsuit she joined that year, one that targeted federal rules intended to enhance protection of wetlands, which Florida kinda has a lot of, and in 2014, she joined several other GOP attorneys general in condemning Connecticut's ban of certain kinds of semi-automatic weapons in the wake of the Sandy Hook shooting, which I think tells you right there how serious she was about delivering justice to the Pulse nightclub victims. But as she stated before, one of the key reasons Bondi entered law enforcement to begin with was a desire to do right by victims, and in 2013, she announced plans to do just that by initiating a new effort to end human trafficking in the state of Florida. Now, of course, her efforts weren't exactly the most sweeping and were mostly limited to an ad campaign that put billboards along streets, inside malls, and on bus shelters to merely raise awareness of human trafficking, providing constituents with a tip sheet about internet safety and a pledge for children to sign and print, all while another character in this story continued to wander wander around Florida at his leisure, but we'll get into him later.
I'm not going to do anything based on what a poll says is the best thing to do, and I'm not concerned about my long-term political health.
Bondi was in fact so passionate about fighting human trafficking that in 2014, she put together a whole campaign ad for her second term that focused on the matter heavily. And let's just say, it's aged about as well as you think it has.
Florida ranks 3rd nationally in calls for help for human trafficking, where young women and children are enslaved and abused. I knew we needed all hands on deck. Businesses and hospitals to spot it, our great law enforcement to stop it, and tougher penalties to punish it. We're taking on Medicaid fraud, pill mills, gangs, and more, and I'll fight to put human trafficking monsters where they belong, behind bars.
Pam Bondi, our Attorney General.
But I guess she was desperate to talk about anything that might divert attention away from a previous scandal that prompted a ton of negative press the previous year. See, in 2013, New York State Attorney General filed a lawsuit against, you ready for a jump scare? Donald Trump.
At Trump University, we teach success. That's what it's all about, success. It's going to happen to you.
Accusing Trump University of engaging in persistent, fraudulent, illegal, and deceptive conduct. These kinds of claims have been piling up all over the nation, not just in New York, but also Florida. Though unlike New York, Pam Bondi's office decided against a formal investigation, a decision that came shortly after a check for $25,000 was written to a political action committee associated with Bondi, who had already announced that she was running for a second term. After all, a candidate like her could really use the money. She told the Tampa Bay Times in 2016 that I never, nor was my office, investigating him. Never. I would never lie. I would never take money. I've been so obviously devastated over this. I'm sure. But the New York Times reports that Florida had been receiving complaints about Trump University since 2008, reaching a total of about 24 by the time Bondi took over. And although her office had previously stated they'd look into the claims, I guess she just decided not to, completely independent of the generous gift the Trump Foundation had given her PAC. She had apparently already sought his support earlier that summer and received a smaller donation of $500 from the real estate mogul around the same time her team was debating whether or not to open an inquiry into the university. Crazy how those coincidences happen. Regardless of whatever Pam wants to say now, in September 2016, the IRS determined the donation was illegal. Bondi wasn't criminally charged, but Trump was ordered to cough up a small fine. And just one more fun fact about this little episode is that Bondi wasn't the only attorney general to receive $25,000 from Trump in 2013. The California AG had also opted not to investigate Trump University following a donation. Her name was Kamala Harris. But the episode showed that Pam Bondi may have been interested in more than simply advocating for victims. Clearly, she had other ambitions. And in 2018, as her second term was coming to an end, she had begun to show a new kind of interest, not necessarily in locking up bad guys, but instead elevating herself to celebrity status. As the Tampa Bay Times reported in August of that year, Pam Bondi had set her criminal justice duties to the side for multiple days to co-host The Five on Fox News, just because she wanted to, I guess. The move was so bizarre and unprecedented that Bondi had to get permission from the Florida Commission on Ethics, which supposedly cleared Pam Bondi to appear as a co-host of The Five and travel to New York, but that's just according to Fox. As the Times reported, Commission spokeswoman Carrie Stillman said that no opinion had been rendered before Bondi made the trip up north for her big TV host debut. Perhaps, as the Times speculated, it was an audition of sorts. As she began looking for her next job, cable television seemed to be one potential landing spot. Instead of using the platform to discuss matters affecting her constituents, such as the renewed fight over stand your ground laws or the opioid crisis ravaging the state, the Times needled Bondi for opining on topics ranging from the Robert Mueller investigation and the murder of an Iowa jogger to new animal cracker boxes, whether kids should walk the dog alone, and colleges that ban snowball fights. I have not had much experience with snowballs, Bondi said on the latter, but I mean, we can only go so far. We're taking the fun out of everything and we're going over the top. Come on. Laser focused on the real issues facing America. Even Sean Hannity congratulated her on this this weird trial run of hosting a primetime show. But hosting a primetime show is not where Bondi would end up. We already know what she did for a job in 2025, but what about that strange, awkward period in between? The former Attorney General had to do something to put food on the table. Did she go into a field that would allow her to help people like she said she always wanted to do? Well, yes, if lobbying for foreign nations and private prisons counts as helping people. The New York Times reports that even while she was Attorney General of Florida, she had what one lobbyist called a business-friendly attitude. Her office had reportedly developed a habit of meeting with lawyers whose clients, Herbalife and a for-profit college chain called Bridgeport Education, had been targeted with investigations in other states. I guess they didn't need to worry about that kind of targeting under Bondi's watch, so maybe it wasn't too surprising when, in early 2019, Pam Bondi herself joined a lobbying group by the name of Ballard Partners, a firm with extensive ties to Donald Trump. The firm itself was launched shortly after Trump's first inauguration as a means to capitalize on his election, as reported by Mother Jones, which notes that Bondi had helped Ballard lobby the White House on behalf of clients such as General Motors, Major League Baseball, and even the government of Qatar, which is said to have paid her $115,000 a month, according to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Her role, as reported by the Times, was to improve Qatar's often criticized human rights record in advance of hosting the 2022 World Cup. Per the U.S. State Department, that record includes, but is not limited to, enforced disappearance, arbitrary arrest, political prisoners, serious restrictions on free expression, restrictions on freedom of movement, serious and unreasonable restrictions on political participation, extensive gender-based violence, existence of laws criminalizing consensual same-sex sexual conduct, and more. Wow, Pam, you really came a long way from, what was it again? Caring all about victims and helping people. By the way, I guess her efforts were successful enough because Qatar did in fact end up hosting the World Cup in 2022, so mission accomplished. Impressive stuff. Though maybe not as impressive as her record defending and lobbying for American mega corporations like Amazon and Uber, both extremely well known for their incredible treatment of workers. Public records also showed she had lobbied the White House and the Department of Homeland Security on behalf of the Geo Group, a private prison firm that benefits from massive contracts with the Justice Department. It's hard to get into specifics when it comes to Bondi's shady lobbying work, since the founder of Ballard Partners, Brian Ballard, conveniently could not recall any specific tasks that Miss Bondi took up for these large corporate clients, reports the New York Times. Similarly, representatives for Amazon, Uber, and GM declined to discuss her work in any detail or said they could not recall any work she did. Geo Group did not respond to requests for comment, the outlet stated, but Geo Group did seem very excited for the potential of Trump's plan for mass deportations at a quarterly call in May 2025. Their then CEO, J. David Donahue, telling investors the company is very excited to support the mission at hand. And that excitement certainly wasn't unwarranted, because in February 2026, the new CEO, George Zoley, was happy to announce that in 2025, we made significant progress towards meeting our financial and strategic objectives. We entered into new or expanded contracts, which are expected to generate up to approximately $520 million in annualized revenues, making it the most successful year for new business wins in our company's history, all while their former lobbyists sat atop the highest law enforcement agency in the country. Fascinating. All this work undoubtedly helped Bondi gain entree to the president, but what really sent her above and beyond was the role she assumed during and after his first round of impeachment hearings. Being brought on as a special advisor in November 2019, Bondi proved herself a willing defender of the president's corruption by leaning into conspiracy theories and doing all she could to deflect from the issue at hand, in a manner so stilted and half-hearted it was mocked by The Daily Show.
The Norway trip was June of 2015. He remained on the board until April of 29.
She was also laughed at for claiming Joe Biden going on fishing trips with his son Hunter was in itself evidence of corruption.
And we clearly know that he had a very fancy job description, and he did none of those things. He attended 1 or 2 board meetings, one in Monaco, and then he went on a fishing trip with Joe Biden's family in Norway. The entire time, Joe Biden knows that this oligarch is corrupt.
You can tell she's always been great at the art of whataboutism. As Vox pointed out, her arguments had nothing to do with the 2 charges against Trump under the articles of impeachment. Instead, her job is to change the subject. While her deflections may have fallen short in the eyes of Congress, Trump having been impeached twice despite his legal team's best efforts, the president deemed her important enough to keep around a little longer. And by the time the fraudulent results of the 2020 election were being finalized in November, Bondi had taken on a new role in Trump world, stopping the steal. At an infamous news conference in Philadelphia on November 4th, 2020, the one accidentally hosted at Four Seasons Total Landscaping as opposed to the Four Seasons Hotel, Bondi told a crowd of rabid Trumpers that we've won Pennsylvania and we want every vote to be counted in a fair way.
For every vote that came in late, that was postmarked late, that discounts every legal vote that came in.
Yep.
So that means all the good residents who are all supporting us in Pennsylvania, their votes don't count by these fake ballots that are coming in late.
What,
and back
Pam?
to the observation, they're not letting us watch the process.
Pam, did you just say fake ballots?
There could be. That's the problem. If they're letting,
Do
we
you have
don't
any
know, Steve.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did know. But that didn't stop her from spreading the false claims anyway, that voter fraud was happening around the country, namely in states like Georgia and Wisconsin. Someone of her stature and background should have known damn well there was no evidence to back up her claims. It's almost like she was just saying whatever might earn the approval of the president. At least that's what ended up happening when she was awarded a seat at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts Board of Trustees that December. The Palm Beach Post reported at the time that Bondi was among the latest batch of Trump devotees rewarded for their loyalty with positions on government advisory boards and commissions. Another name appointed alongside Bondi was Paolo Zampoli. You might know Zampoli as the Italian modeling scout accredited for introducing Donald to Melania in 1998, and who had also tried to buy a modeling agency with another longtime fixture of the president's inner circle. You know who I'm referring to, it's Jeffrey Epstein. I talked about Zampoli over on my second channel a couple weeks ago, which you can subscribe to right now down below, by the way, and his successful attempt to deport the mother of his child to Brazil, a woman who once worked as a teenage model under Epstein associate Jean-Luc Brunel and was flown to New York City on the Lolita Express at age 16. It really is one big club, isn't it? The New Yorker reports that not even the insurrection on January 6th could lessen her support of Donald Trump. In 2021, she chaired 2 Trump-affiliated committees, earning more than $240,000. 2 years later, after Trump was indicted for trying to change the outcome of the 2020 election in Georgia, Bondi told Hannity that once Trump returned to office, the Department of Justice, the prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones. And by the time he finally clawed back the presidency on that fateful night in November 2024, Pam Bondi knew her shameless and unwavering sycophancy was about to pay off big, for those were the very traits that Trump was hoping to find in his new cabinet. The New Yorker states that Trump's previous selections for Attorney General were among his greatest regrets of his first term, so naturally he was looking for the opposite of Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr, whom he was convinced had betrayed him before, according to Mike Davis, who heads a conservative legal group. While a Justice Department official denies it, the New Yorker reported that Pam Bondi had said privately that Matt Gaetz was a poor choice for the job, a sentiment that was clearly echoed throughout Washington, regardless of whether she actually said it or not. Thanks to Gaetz's track record of alleged sex crimes and drug use, the Attorney General job came up for grabs, and Pam Bondi happened to be in just the right place to seize it.
Hours after Matt Gaetz was out, Pam Bondi was in. as President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General. Bondi is a former two-term Florida State Attorney General and a staunch Trump ally who's been signaling the administration's intentions for over a year.
She is going to focus on the issues that need to be focused on, right? We need a safer communities. We need a safer country. She is going to be able to deliver that. We cannot go through what we have over the last 8 years with the weaponization of justice that we've seen with all of the attempts to go after Donald Trump.
But before we go any further, I want to take a short detour here for a word from today's sponsor. We know them, we love them. This video is sponsored by the wonderful folks over at Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one management software that provides individuals and businesses with a wide array of applications to simplify your daily work operations. Whether you're invoicing a client, paying a vendor bill, re-entering all of that into your accounting software, or trying to adjust pricing on your product page with 10 different tabs open, Odoo is here to serve your needs. Odoo offers plenty of different apps, but their project app is perfectly up my alley since it allows me to visualize and keep track of all the different video ideas I have across both of my channels. Thanks to Odoo's incredible versatility, not only can I seamlessly create new projects, I can also set reminders to never miss deadlines. The chatter feature makes it easy to streamline communication, maintain traceability, and provide accountability among team members. Users can communicate with one another through chatter windows called composers, which allows you to log notes, upload files, and schedule activities all in one place. You can also split the workload into smaller subtasks, making the work even easier to manage. And the best part is, it's all affordable. While Odoo offers several pricing plans, your first application is free for life, and that includes unlimited hosting and support. If you want to expand your workspace as your business and needs grow, you can gain access to all other available applications starting at just $24.90 USD per month. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description down below right now to get started today. It helps the channel, and it'll no doubt help you organize your work. Massive thanks to the people over at Odoo for sponsoring this video and keeping all of our workspaces nice and organized. The U.S. Attorney General really is the most powerful and consequential law enforcement officer in the nation. The Justice Department rules over a number of agencies that include the FBI, the DEA, and the ATF, so naturally the AG is responsible for a department of about 115,000 employees total. Pam Bondi was confirmed by the Senate on a vote of 54 to 46, just days after Donald Trump's second inauguration. While she insisted during her trial that she would not let her personal politics play a role in her decision-making, her first few days proved the very opposite. As CNN reports, she immediately got to work purging the department of career prosecutors whom she perceived as being against Trump, his supporters, or his agenda, shut down offices whose work touched friends and allies of the White House, and presided over one of the most aggressive litigation strategies on behalf of a president in history. Her first day on the job saw a quiet end to a years-long federal law enforcement effort to combat secret influence campaigns by foreign nations, reported NBC, along with the disbanding of a task force established to target Russian oligarchs, per Reuters. You know, stuff that really helps the American public. By May, Bondi had put together a task force aimed at rooting out so-called anti-Christian bias at a time when the Trump administration had been going after liberal Christian groups that help immigrants and the poor, as Axios reported last year. Bondi was sure to spotlight evangelicals who felt the Biden administration had targeted them and touted this administration's move to protect those who had been accused of blocking access to abortion clinics, according to PBS. Though not all evangelicals were happy with the move, with 24 Christian leaders and scholars writing an open letter condemning the task force as a way to weaponize one tradition within Christianity over others, creating anti-Christian bias even as it claims to combat it. "You aren't speaking for us," wrote one reverend who also happened to be the CEO of the Interfaith Alliance. Axios also made sure to emphasize how unpopular the task force was, citing a Public Religion Research Institute survey that found a whopping 78% of Americans were against its establishment. Another way Bondi drew criticism was by targeting NOVA, also known as the National Organization for Victim Advocacy. Mother Jones reported last April the devastation felt by the program's director Director, Claire Ponder-Celeb, when she learned that Bondi had cut a federal grant that supported the pilot program to train victim advocates who staff domestic violence shelters, hotlines, and rape crisis centers. The program, the Victim Advocacy Corps, began in 2022 and selected 15 students from 6 colleges and universities that serve minority populations to take part in a year-long paid fellowship at local organizations, including campus-based sexual assault programs, domestic violence agencies, and family justice centers. The DOJ notice claimed the grant no longer effectuates department priorities, which it said were focused on more directly supporting certain law enforcement operations and combating violent crime. To Celeb, this rationale made no sense. Our Victim Advocacy Corps members are providing direct victim services in communities across the country, she told Mother Jones. Cutting these programs puts victims at risk and cuts essential life-saving services. But the magazine points out that this wasn't even the only program related to victim safety that was slashed under Bondi's watch. In an effort to cut what she proudly referred to as wasteful spending, Reuters found that Bondi had canceled 365 grants that totaled over $800 million when they were awarded. These cuts were reported to have impacted victim service programs ranging from trauma centers and sign language interpretation for domestic violence victims to police training. Though a Justice Department spokesperson told the publication that 7 of the victim services grants would be restored, such a correction only came after Reuters had pointed it out, which just shows how haphazard it was. And while Bondi promised the DOJ would continue to ensure that services for victims are not impacted, the Vera Institute, a nonprofit that focuses on criminal justice reform, issued a statement this month that read in part, almost exactly a year ago, the DOJ under Bondi abruptly and illegally terminated millions in funding for Vera's programs to promote safety in corrections, support crime survivors with disabilities, and expand mental health crisis response services in cities. They sued the Justice Department as a result, and at the time of me writing this, the case is still pending. But unfortunately, it's just one of many examples of how Bondi had worked to make us all less safe as a means to kiss up to her boss. And she wasn't just making us less safe, she was also trampling on our constitutional rights. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination last September, the administration as a whole appeared to lose their collective mind as they were very quick to threaten anyone who dared speak out of turn and say anything distasteful about the president's favorite podcaster. Vance demanded those who made jokes should lose their jobs, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio went to work revoking the visas of people accused of making offensive comments. Sitting across from the Eva Braun of the modern era, Stephen Miller's wife, Katie, Bondi assured her department wouldn't stand for so-called hate speech leveled against the Kirkster.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
But I'd like to respond to that with a quote from one of America's favorite thought leaders. Hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free, Charlie Kirk, 2024. Despite facing criticism even from figures on the right for threatening to go after Americans over what they say, Bondi told Sean Hannity that she had directed the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division to prosecute businesses that refused to print Kirk's pictures for vigils. ABC News noted here that it is not clear what criminal statute would even be relevant in that instance. Plus, is it really necessary to print photos of Charlie Kirk? It's gotten to the point where I see his face more than I see my own family. Kind of amazing that Bondi tried to attack average Americans for exercising the very same right that gave Charlie Kirk permission to attack minorities and wish death upon Palestinian civilians living in Gaza. I just think if this guy could get away with saying this.
So, it's funny. I used to say that, hey, if you as a gay person would go to Gaza, they'd throw you off of tall buildings, right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't... Is that too soon? I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
Then I'm not sure we get to police what others say about him, Miss Bondi. Just makes you look a little silly, a little unprofessional maybe, I don't know. Can't imagine why Time magazine reported that under her reign, a large number of veteran prosecutors began to leave their posts, particularly in public corruption and national security divisions, as internal dissent over politically driven investigations grew, which was to be expected. Similar to Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth, and pretty much everyone else in Trump's second cabinet, Bondi's role in government was not to do her job well, but rather to make sure her actions catered to an audience of one. Regardless of what she said at her confirmation hearing, politically driven investigations did begin to mount at Bondi's direction, in what felt more like an attempt to appease the president than to actually serve the people of the country. I mean, I'm not sure who outside the brain-diseased MAGA cult was clamoring for a criminal investigation into former FBI Director James Comey, or New York Attorney General Letitia James, or Democratic Senator Adam Schiff. I mean, I don't really think much of any of those people one way or the other, but what would them going to jail do for the average American? How does that make people safer? I don't want to spend too much time on these sham investigations though, because they predictably amounted to nothing. As CNN outlined, charges against Comey and James were dismissed by a judge who said the prosecutor, personally appointed by Trump, that brought the cases didn't have the authority to do so. Other cases were refuted by grand juries, with many other cases made to defend Trump's policies and executive orders being slapped down by trial-level judges. Which is all to say that despite her fervor, Bondi wasn't exactly yielding the kind of results Trump would have liked to see during those first 100 days especially. And as several sources told CNN, that shaky track record put her on the hot seat multiple times. They report that tensions finally exploded in January, when Trump lambasted the Attorney General in front of a group of other attorneys as weak and ineffective. Those sources claim Bondi would have been toast then had it not been for the interference of Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, a longtime Bondi ally. As the Daily Beast pointed out, it seems the president's frustrations became public around September, when he seemingly posted a private text message meant for Bondi, writing in part, "Same old story as last time. All talk, no action. Nothing is being done. We can't delay any longer," he complained. "It's killing our reputation and credibility." Upon realizing what he had just posted to Truth Social, Trump was surprised, according to what one source told NBC News, and that the president reacted by saying, "Oh," which is just awesome. But there was one particular area where Bondi seemed especially protective of her boss, an area that would do more to hurt her standing with the general public than anything else ever could: the Epstein files. I'm sure we all remember this little stunt.
Several conservative media figures were given early access during a visit to the White House, showing off binders and posing for pictures, some later posting how underwhelmed they were.
And it really truly was nothing more than a stunt. After going on Fox News the previous nights to tease what she promised would be breaking news pertaining to the Jeffrey Epstein case, Trump's base of support, which had elected him in part because they hoped he would be the one to finally release the files once and for all, bringing justice to Epstein's victims, Bondi made a huge show of inviting MAGA-friendly influencers to the White House to receive big, white, shiny binders full of supposedly shocking revelations that would have granted transparency to the public and maybe given the victims a sliver of justice by holding Epstein and his co-conspirators accountable for their decades of unchecked depravity. It was sold as some never-before-seen material. Only problem was, the material had been seen before, and some of the binder's contents were in fact more redacted here than in past releases, as even Trump's most brain-diseased glazers were quick to point out.
Evidence. This is the thing. This is something you can feel. This is tangible. You can open this. You can feel what the paper feels like. You can smell it. This is tangible, physical, concrete evidence that the deep state is lying to you, and that it still exists, and that they're trying to subvert Trump, which means they're trying to subvert you. That's actually incredibly powerful. That's incredibly powerful to hold this in your hand and know that this is the proof that they told Pam Bondi that this was it, and they were lying to her.
At the time, Bondi actually pretended to agree with the critics. Perhaps in an effort to buy herself more time, she feigned outrage at the lack of information, lashing out and blaming others as opposed to taking responsibility for her own Department of Justice. She embarrassed everybody's favorite DUI hire, Kash Patel, by slamming his FBI for not handing over everything they had. Reports circulated that she was furious with the lackluster results and demanded the FBI turn over the rest of the files within 14 days, which never actually happened, and Bondi suspiciously never followed up on the matter. Despite promising a Phase 2 release at some later date, progress appeared to stall until that summer, when the FBI and DOJ released a now infamous joint memo, claiming in just a few paragraphs that there wasn't enough information to charge any co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. There was nothing to indicate he had participated in blackmail operations. The investigation was effectively over. Epstein did in fact kill himself, and there was no incriminating list of clients, which came after Bondi had already said the so-called client list was sitting on her desk, ready for review a few months prior.
It's sitting on my desk right now.
And it flew directly in the face of what the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, Jeffrey Epstein's good friend and next-door neighbor for many years, said about the late pedophile, which is that he was the greatest blackmailer ever. Needless to say, the public wasn't buying this thing, and if the PR crisis wasn't already bad enough, Bondi and Patel had just kicked it into maximum overdrive. The backlash was so swift and so severe that it actually got Congress to do something for once. Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie were able to draft and successfully pass legislation to force the DOJ to release all that they had, which the department eventually sort of complied with, but they did so in such a messy and chaotic way that it made it difficult for the public to know what was relevant and what wasn't. It wasn't made easy for people to sift through the millions of files dumped out by the Justice Department, since nothing was categorized or labeled, almost like the DOJ was like, here, you, and just didn't care how disorganized it was. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they hoped people wouldn't find the more serious claims against the president. It certainly seemed that way, with an NPR investigation finding that the Justice Department has withheld some Epstein files related to allegations that President Trump sexually abused a minor. It also removed some documents from the public database where accusations against Jeffrey Epstein also mentioned Trump. Following this reporting, Democratic Representative Robert Garcia, the House Oversight Committee's ranking member, stated that yesterday I received unredacted evidence logs at the Department of Justice. Oversight Democrats can confirm that the DOJ appears to have illegally withheld FBI interviews with this survivor who accused President Trump of heinous crimes. What he's referring to here are extremely graphic and detailed allegations from an anonymous woman who claimed to have been raped by both Trump and Epstein when she was 13 years old in 1993. NPR reported that out of the 3 million documents released by the DOJ, this specific allegation against Trump appears only in copies of the FBI list of claims and the DOJ slideshow. But a review of FBI case file logs and discovery documents turned over to Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorneys in the criminal case against her point to one place the claim could have come from, and how serious investigators took it. The FBI interviewed this Trump and Epstein accuser 4 times. That is, according to an FBI serial report and a list of non-testifying witness material in the Maxwell case that were also released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Only the first interview, conducted July 24th, 2019, is in the public database. That interview does not mention Trump. Of 15 documents listed in a log of the Maxwell discovery material for this first accuser, only 7 are in the Epstein Files database. Those missing also include notes that accompany 3 of the interviews. Another interview that had been removed from the DOJ's public files after its initial publication and was republished a month later was with another woman who had been abused by both Maxwell and Epstein starting at the age of 13. In the first of 6 interviews with the FBI that spanned between 2019 and 2021, she told authorities how, at one point, Epstein took her to Trump's Mar-a-Lago club to meet him. Epstein told Trump, "This is a good one, huh?" The woman added that both men chuckled and that she felt uncomfortable, but at the time was too young to understand why. Now, the DOJ told NPR that the interview was only removed because it had been flagged by the victim or her counsel for review, but it did follow a trend of other Trump-related files being removed and republished by the department after people noticed they were gone. NPR reported that one interview with a fleeting mention of Trump was removed from the public database and it subsequently restored last week, while another interview with the woman's mother is still offline. After publication, the Justice Department said the file required additional redactions and will be reposted soon. In that conversation, the mother recalled hearing that a prince and Donald Trump visited Epstein's house, which made her think that if they're there, then how could Epstein be a criminal, according to NPR's copy of the file that was first published. This was all in addition to criticism that the DOJ had illegally redacted other names of powerful men while leaving victims' names and information unredacted, meaning that an already bad situation was spiraling more out of control. It's no wonder Pam Bondi was, according to CNN, barred from appearing on Fox News interviews due to an inability to quiet the public outcries, with Trump complaining privately about the Attorney General for not being able to put an end to the issue. Instead, matters of PR fell to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who, in my personal opinion, isn't exactly the greatest alternative if you're looking for someone to make the matter go away. Todd Blanche is the guy who gave Ghislaine Maxwell a softball interview ahead of her relocation to a more relaxed detention facility last year, and who actually thought it was a good idea to go on TV and utter these words to an audience of millions.
And we will always investigate any evidence of misconduct, but as you know, it is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
But there was one appearance she wasn't able to get out of, one in front of Congress, which, if you've seen the clips, you understand instantly that whoever barred her from going on TV absolutely made the right call.
How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer the
theatrics are
question the way I asked it.
The hearing went on for 4 hours, and as much as I'd like to get into all of it here, this video has already gotten long enough, and I've already covered it in much greater detail on my second channel, Jobbery, which you can watch right now by clicking the link down below. In summary, though, Bondi spent her time vacillating between leveling personal attacks against members of Congress.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch. Not on our time. No way. And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
Deflecting from the topics at hand.
And none of them asked Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein.
Touting what a great job the Trump administration had done on unrelated issues.
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done.
And of course, enjoying various congratulatory statements made by Republican members of the House.
And when it comes to the big stuff, how are you guys getting this stuff so right? What contributes, from your perspective, to this dramatic decrease in crime in major U.S. cities under the Trump administration?
These humiliating displays of ass-kissing were really the only instances where tensions cooled down. The rest of the hearing was categorized by Bondi screaming like a banshee, acting like we shouldn't care about what Epstein or his associates did on account of the stock market doing so well.
The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
Which didn't exactly do much to satisfy the group of Epstein survivors sitting directly behind the Attorney General. Survivors who have sadly grown accustomed to being blatantly ignored and mistreated by Bondi's department and the Trump administration as a whole, with the Attorney General unable to muster up the courage to even turn around and look at the individuals her office had failed to serve.
Will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions, the witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer.
Attorney General can
That's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she
It
doesn't
is
like the
my
answer.
time.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't
a
she ask
question.
Merrick Garland this?
I am
Twice
reclaiming
when he
my
sat in my
time, and
chair.
when I
will
reclaim my
continue to
time,
answer.
it is
Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady has reclaimed
I'm
her
not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
Which I think tells you everything you need to know about her character. Caught between protecting her boss and doing the right thing by the victims of her boss's longtime friend, America's top law enforcement officer had made her position clearly known. But somehow, I guess she was deluded enough to walk out of there thinking she did a good job. According to a report from the New York Times, Bondi emerged from the hearing in an upbeat mood after delivering what she believed was her best, which is to say a most bombastically defiant defense of her handling of the release of the Epstein files. But when she logged onto Twitter and saw the entire country actually had the opposite reaction, Miss Bondi did not blame herself. Instead, the Times reports, she told an associate that the committee's Republican chairman, Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, had refused to defend her and had enabled Democratic questioners. Republican Nancy Mace also went after the Attorney General, asking why the DOJ is more focused on shielding the powerful than delivering justice, adding that the Epstein case is one of the greatest cover-ups in American history. And in mid-March, a few weeks after Bondi's disastrous performance, several Republicans, including Mace, broke with their own leadership by joining Democrats to subpoena Bondi and have her testify under oath again about the Epstein case, this time behind closed doors. Ahead of that appearance, scheduled originally for April 14th, Bondi and Blanche met with members of the committee for a showdown that ended in Democrats walking out less than an hour into the meeting, reportedly out of frustration that Bondi would not commit to honoring the panel's subpoena. Democrat Maxwell Frost, who called the appearance a fake deposition where no one can see what's going on, told the press that we want her under oath because we don't trust her. When fellow Democrat Summer Lee asked the committee's chairman, Republican James Comer, if he would compel Bondi to comply with the subpoena and initiate proceedings to hold her in contempt of Congress if she didn't show up, Comer refused to answer and instead told the Congresswoman that she was bitching. When asked directly if she would comply with the subpoena, Bondi insisted,
I will follow the law.
However, I don't know if you've noticed, but April 14th has now come and gone, and Pam Bondi did in fact skip her scheduled testimony on the Epstein files, defying a subpoena and now facing calls to hold her in contempt of Congress. Whether congressional leaders will step up and hold Bondi accountable, though, remains to be seen. But in the background of all of this unfolding, Pam Bondi was silently coming to terms with an unavoidable fact. Her days were numbered. As the Times reported, Bondi saw what happened to friend of the channel and former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem at the beginning of March, and told a friend that Trump's willingness to fire one of his biggest worshippers meant she might be in jeopardy too. Miss Bondi hoped to save her job, or at the very least, buy a little more time until the summer to give herself a graceful exit. She ended up with neither. The Daily Beast outlined the events of Wednesday, April 1st, a fitting day for her sham of a position to come to an end. As the pair rode together in the Beast on their way to the Supreme Court building, the president turned to the Attorney General and broke the news. I think it's time, he told her, despite, as CNN reports, Bondi making a last-ditch effort to save her job by flying out to Florida and exploring the possibility of charging another one of Trump's longtime enemies, former CIA Director John Brennan. This wasn't enough, and by the time Trump made the firing public, Bondi was still in Tampa, back home, as if the past 14 months in Washington was all just a bad dream. The Times reported she was emotional, and I kinda understand why. Trump didn't even bother to give Bondi a fake government title like he did with Noem, quite unceremoniously declaring she'd be looking for a new job in the private sector, perhaps lobbying for Qatar like she did before. I mean, who knows? The possibilities are endless when you're as depraved and desperate as Pam Bondi. But no matter where she lands, I think it's safe to say that her resume speaks for itself. When Pam Bondi was asked by Elysian magazine all those years ago what she wanted her legacy to be, she responded, I hope it's just helping people. She cited the war on drugs and how all that ties into the human trafficking because they're immediately addicting young women and men to drugs, making them truly captives. So it's really circular. Date rape is also on the rise. We're finding young women who are completely innocent and someone has slipped a drug into their drink, even if they're studying. I learned of a horrific case very recently where a young woman had no memory of what happened to her and woke up just wearing a ripped t-shirt. In an answer to another question, Bondi stated, you know, every day there's something you can do to help someone. Human trafficking is very real. It's very alive, sadly, in our country, in our state, and in our world. We're doing everything we can to combat that. But there's so much more that needs to be done. And she's right, there is so much more that needs to be done. The survivors of Jeffrey Epstein know all too well about the systemic injustices being perpetuated today by the Department of Justice. They understand what it's like because for 14 excruciating months, they were routinely ignored, repudiated, and hurt by Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had sworn to protect them by upholding the law and holding their abusers accountable, making sure that what happened to them may never be allowed to happen again under her watch. Pam Bondi failed them, and I am a firm believer that after all she's done, all the press conferences and hearings, after all the memos and charges her office brought forward, it will be this image that lives on for generations. This is the image that will haunt Pam Bondi's legacy forever, whether she likes it or not. Despite earlier efforts in her career to combat human trafficking, Bondi will forever be remembered as a sick and deranged protector of pedophiles. Nothing more, nothing less. Dismissed as a mere footnote in Trump's second term, which is already encapsulated by wanton corruption and endless depravity as it is. On April 20th, it was reported in The Hill that congressional Democrats are still pushing to question the former Attorney General under oath, despite Republicans like Scott Perry downplaying the idea of Bondi ever facing the same level of scrutiny, saying, I don't know what the point of the whole exercise is at this point. She's a private citizen now. Democrat Suhas Subramani told The Hill that I don't understand why they wouldn't think the former Attorney General, who is the sole reason why so many files were withheld for so long and who had custody over them and complete control over the situation, wouldn't have information about why 2.5 million files have been withheld. As fellow Democrat Melania Stansbury put it, listen, Pam Bondi has served as the AG for over a year. She violated the congressional subpoena demanding the files, and she repeatedly, over her entire term of service as the AG, engaged in manufactured lies to the American people over the Epstein case. In addition to that, based on what I've seen of the unredacted files, there are dozens of potentially prosecutable crimes and cases in the Epstein files, and they have not pursued a single investigation, she added, including claims that directly relate to Trump. I want to go ahead and end this video with a few words from those who have been among the most affected by the DOJ's inaction. Annie Farmer, one of the earliest known survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, told People magazine shortly after Bondi's ousting that this is not about a single person. It is about a government and judicial system that has repeatedly failed Epstein survivors. Regardless of who holds power, survivors deserve accountability, transparency, protection from retaliation, and assurance that those who enabled Epstein, Maxwell, and others will be investigated and, if appropriate, prosecuted. In a statement to independent journalist Aaron Parnas, Amanda and Sky Roberts, the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, said that alliance to a corrupt agenda never serves you. Another one falls on the sword to protect the powerful. We hope she has the courage to testify and actually do right by survivors this time. And it is important to remember that Pam Bondi does still have an opportunity to do the right thing if she wants and appear before Congress, revealing all that she knows under oath, answering questions honestly without deflection. But judging from what we've seen in the past, I think we all know how that would go.
What does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked? Are you kidding?
Committee will be in order.